Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. This has been fascinating to listen as our learned members of the majority has said, we don't know how we're going to fund this in the future, but by golly, we're going to vote for this budget. This budget is going up by $2.7 billion in the next 2 years. It's a 22% increase. The Oregon Health Authority has already announced and made available to us the information that it's expected that there is $1 billion of additional costs that is to be determined. They don't know where the money is going to come from in the next budget in 2015, and $1.5 billion of undetermined money in the budget after that. And that's assuming the federal government comes through with the money that they're promising. But that's okay. They're going to pay 100% for the next few years and then 90% in the unforeseeable future. Where do they get the money? Well, the Federal Reserve Board is borrowing $93 billion a month in Treasury bonds. We're creating it out of thin air, over $1 trillion a year presently. But that's okay because I can just print more. Oh no, we don't print anymore. It's all digital. We save the money on all the trees and printing because now we just add it. There is no money. The federal government is insolvent and they're making promises they can't afford to keep, and we're passing budgets based on those promises. It's unsustainable. It makes no sense. We do not have the courage to say what is the long-term plan, and we must live within it. We are able to balance a budget for the next 2 years because we have a forecast that's increasing by $1.5 billion, and we have $500 million of beginning funds coming from a well-managed 2011-13 biennium. That money's one-time money, that $500 million. Part, 137 or so goes to the rainy day fund. The rest is the beginning balance for the next 2 years. Congratulations, we have all that money. Let's spend it. But we can't count on the next biennium and the one after that to have a 12 or 13% increase in revenue. And now we're increasing this budget by 22%. It makes no sense. You wouldn't run your business that way. You couldn't run your family that way. And yet we think that this makes sense. This is a travesty in judgment, and I believe that I'll be no vote on it.
Thank you, Senator Bates, please. Just a couple of comments real quickly. Some of the things we've heard here today. I'm going to talk to you about first one hole in the budget that Representative Freeman's been working very hard on, and I appreciate his efforts. The Coleman Foundation doesn't have enough funds to maintain a program for screening and treatment of women with cervical and breast cancer. We're going to try to address that at the end of the session if we possibly can. We're working very hard on that. We've got new figures in that the number of women involved is maybe as high as 25,000. So we're looking at those very carefully, and that discussion will go on. As far as cigarettes are concerned, the overall population is dropping the number of people who are smoking cigarettes down to about 18%. But there's a growth in the young people smoking. In fact, I personally encourage a lot of Tier 1 people to smoke, to be rather real. Just kidding. The bottom line here is we do need to do more in cigarette smoking in the young population. 8th graders, 9th graders are smoking at a higher level than before, and that's where the money should go. And we had that discussion committee. We're trying to focus those dollars on the younger population. They do not watch TV at night. They're on their Twitters and what else they're looking at. We're going to try to get there and help them get off the cigarettes. The other issue brought up, quite frankly, is the issue about dental care organizations. There was a promise made, many of us failed. It's not being fulfilled now. That's still an ongoing discussion, and we are trying to work on that issue to give some certainty to DCLs over the next 3 or 4 years as they transfer from state contracts to CCO contracts. The Blue Mountain issue, Blue Mountain will be staying open until we complete Junction City, and those patients can be transferred. We'll probably be extending it well past the first of the year, and I'll start getting it back to you and tell you about Senator Hansel. PEB this is the first time we've had in this budget, and a lot of this budget increase you see here is moving $1 billion of budgets into this that weren't there before. PEB and OEB for the first time will have caps on them. They've never had that before. They've been open-ended. They just raise their premiums as need to, and the people who pay the premiums primarily is the state of Oregon. Taxpayers' money, general fund money. So PEB and OEB have caps placed on them over the next biennium for the first time. And those caps are set essentially at an inflationary level at about 3 to 4% on a per annum basis. And my personal business, if I could get health care for my employees for 3 or 4% increases per annum, I feel like we're getting somewhere because we have double-digit inflation increases over the last 10 to 15 years. Healthcare costs are actually slowing. They are coming down. And it's going to be a big transition for hospitals and others to make that change as we go to more primary and preventative care. As an example, in Southern Oregon, we normally do 100 bypasses of hearts every year. Those are very expensive operations. That is down 25% in the last year and a half, probably because of the use of statins to control the blood pressure and other issues. So we are starting to see a slowing of this huge onslaught of cost of health care, but we must keep pushing for it because we cannot afford to continue to spend the kind of money we're spending now. These budgets we've put up are actually set to keep up with inflation and not push much past inflation and to match the revenue coming into the state. So we're no longer looking at a 4% revenue increase and a 10% cost in health care. We're trying to bring these under control with this budget, and this is the first time we've actually had a chance to do this.
Thank you, Senator. Members, before we continue, just want to do a little bit of a time check. The House is supposed to be on the floor at 10. We'll keep going until they call us in. We have a very full agenda. These are very important budgets. I don't want to deny anyone their opportunity to express their views. I would hope for some assistance, though, in keeping comments as concise as possible to make your point on the budget and be able to move on. Senator,
I just wanted to add in one issue that's been brought up, and that's the dependency on federal funding. And I don't think that there's any member that sits here at this dais that is not guilty of voting for some grant, for voting for some approval to apply. And certainly we are dependent upon the federal largest. I think I've said on a number of occasions, individuals who I have the good fortune of being on the executive branch and watch this legislative side, who use as the overriding objective in accepting federal dollars, was it or is it something that meets the goal and objectives of this state before they accepted those federal dollars. I will leave it at that. Certainly it is up to this body to decide the prudency of whether or not we actually accept either the grant or federal funding, and with it comes the other part of it: what are the risks? This has an awful lot of dollars in it, probably one of the largest budgets that we will see coming to us, with the exception of maybe human services, but it also is the work of years and years, and I want to actually commend the good Representative Freeman and others who helped work on this transformation to bring a number of health care programs together. It's the first time that we've talked about including physical and behavioral health and some of those other pieces. So I just would encourage you to actually take all that into consideration as we pass out this budget.
thank you, Senator. Senator Steinhoyer, please.
Thank you. You know, there's a reason that sayings an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or a stitch in time saves 9, have been around for centuries in one form or another. And they relate to the points that Senator Bates made, that we're cutting down dramatically on the number of bypass surgeries needed because we are actually intervening early. Any small business person knows that when a key employee has a heart attack or a stroke, or his blood pressure is uncontrolled so they have horrible headaches, or their blood sugar is uncontrolled so they start to have problems with their feet, and they miss work because of that, that's a huge hit in your productivity. So yes, is this expensive? Damn straight it is. But honestly, this is the money that will save our children. This is the money that will save our state for our grandchildren. And investing this money now will get Oregonians healthier. It'll get them better educated because they'll be better able to concentrate in school and stay focused. It'll keep parents at the office instead of home taking care of sick kids. It'll keep them in the office instead of in the hospital. And ultimately, this investment, the ROI, will be better than anything you can do in the stock market.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Colleagues, I like economics, and the problem that we have here is we have a huge market failure. The consumer has no reason not to consume. The provider has no reason not to provide. What happens? Costs escalate. What's the worst possible thing you can do for that? Throw a pile of money on it. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. And that's exactly what's happened. And until we address the market failure, we are going to have huge escalations in this arena. Number two, we have not dealt with tort reform, which is another thing that would help bring down the cost of this budget. And until we do those two things, I'm going to be a no.
Thank you, Senator. See no for Representative Upton, please.
You were so close,
I was so
Mr.
close.
Chair. Talk about controlling healthcare costs, and I think we should start with this budget. So I'll be a no.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no further discussion, is there objections to the motion? Representative McLean, Representative Huffman, Representative Freeman, Representative Hanna, Representative Smith, Representative Richardson, Senator Thompson, Senator Girard, Senator Whitson. Motion carries. Close work session. Open work session. Senate Bill 5523, Office of the Governor. Representative Smith, please.
Mr. Co-Chair, colleagues, Senate Bill 5523 is the budget bill for the Office of the Governor. Your subcommittee on general government approved a total budget of $15,481,723 in 54 positions. The general fund budget of $10,304,037 is 66.9% less than the 2011-13 legislatively approved budget. The budget for the Office of the Governor had several general fund programs temporarily added to it during the 2011 biennium. These programs included the Oregon Education Investment Board, early childhood, and youth development programs. The subcommittee approved removing these programs from the Governor's office and transferring them to the Department of Education and the Oregon Education Investment Board as a standalone entity. A budget note addresses concerns with positions that are borrowed from other agencies but are utilized in the agency's operations. The agency is also expected to report on any changes that are needed to its key performance measures during the 2014 session. Colleagues, your General Government Subcommittee recommends Senate Bill 5523.
Thank you, Representative. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, is there objection to the motion? Seeing no objection, the motion carries. Close the work session. Open work session, Senate Bill 5529. Senator Bates, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Senate Bill 5529 is the budget bill for the Department of Human Services, also known as DHS. DHS delivers a range of supports and services for children, families, seniors, and people with physical and developmental disabilities through a system of field offices and community partners, primarily nonprofits. The Human Services Subcommittee approved an agency budget of $2.3 billion general fund, $9.1 billion total funds, and 7,630 positions, 7.480.61 FTEs. The budget is 5.9% total funds more than the current budget. However, without program transfers to the Oregon Health Authority that lowered the DH budget by $347.8 million total funds, the budget is a 7.4% total funds increase from the 2011-13 budget. The recommended budget continues core programs, adjusts for caseload changes, and makes targeted program investments. However, it does continue the suspension of some temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, program services that are also unfunded in the 2011-13 biennium. Key program elements and significant budget actions include maintain the 60-month TANF time limit and provide a small increase over current funding levels for the Jobs, Employment, and Training Program. Increase funding for the employment-related daycare programs to support working families and to cover modest rate increases for child care providers. Continue support for the Self-Sufficiency Modernization Project towards workers having fewer business processes, less paperwork, and more time with clients. Bring the Centers for Independent Living up to a minimal operating level. Fund statewide implementation of the Strengthening, Preserving, and Reuniting Families programs under Senate Bill 964 that was passed in 2011. The program focuses on providing services to allow children to remain safe with their families and avoid foster care. Add 113 positions in child welfare to increase staffing from 67% to 75% of the workload model, increasing responsive and coverage, allowing implementation of differential response, and supporting Senate Bill 964 expansion. I would note that our child welfare workers have been overloaded for the last 4 to 5 to 6 years with huge caseloads, making it impossible for them to monitor foster families, to monitor children who might be at risk for neglect or abuse. This bill starts putting those caseloads at a level that is actually meaningful. I know we're all following what's going on in the newspapers right now, What is going on there is a direct result of a lack of funding for the casework. That's such huge caseloads. There was no way in the world that could follow what's going on properly in some areas. The bill also increases rates paid to long-term care providers, including nursing facilities and home and community-based providers, which is possible due to continuation of the long-term care nursing facility provider assessment, just approved House Bill 2216. Maintains funding for Oregon Project Independence and serves more seniors with severe mental illness in the community instead of at the state hospital. Expands the number of family-to-family networks and support the Employment First initiative to provide an expanded array of services to more people with developmental disabilities and their families. It includes expenditures and revenues based on receiving a federal waiver on the Community First Choice State Option Plan, commonly called the K Plan. The waiver will provide more extensive home and community-based services and will leverage additional federal dollars for these programs. Related investments include provider rate increases, program changes, and funding to increase direct care workers' compensation. The budget report for this bill contains seven budget notes related to provider rates and worker wages, child welfare program investments and outcomes, senior and mental health services, repurposing executive capacity, and development disability services. The budget report also includes the agency's performance measures and targets. The Human Services Subcommittee recommends Senate Bill 5529 be amended for it do pass as amended. A couple of comments. First, on the budget notes. The budget notes are designed to guide the agency on wherever they must be done within the costs available to the agency. We do not want services affected by doing what the budget notes ask you to do. I want to make it very clear that some of these budget notes might be expensive for the agency to do, and we would ask that it is very clear that if they can't be completed by February or the following session, that they do as much as they can on them, but at times they may not be completed because we want them to be spending their money on actual services to members. The other thing you should know about this budget is the overall try in this budget was to move away from just sustaining people through a recession and moving them to self-sufficiency. We want to move people off TANF. We want to move them into jobs. We want to enhance the jobs program. We want to move people into the right direction so they have full and productive lives, get them out of poverty, not just maintain them there. And developmental disabilities and mental health, we are finally starting to reinvest in our local communities in a way which I believe and others believe will cut down our need for corrections to take on so many of these patients, for the state hospital to take on so many, and for actually having healthier local communities. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Witz, please.
Thank you. A brief observation and two specific questions. The combined OHA and DHS budgets are an increase of about $24.4 billion. You break that down, it's more than $6,000 for every soul that lives in Oregon. Right at $25,000 per family of four. These two budgets add nearly $1,000 to that per capita expenditure. The first question is in a previous budget, I think 2 years ago, we talked about the work participation requirements for TANFs not being met, the federal requirements. I wonder if that is the case in this one, and if that's true, what is the potential penalty if they're not being met? And the second question is also regarding TANF. The governor came out with a budget, as I recall, that asked to reduce the TANF limit to 36 months, and here it is back at 60 again. We have an economy that supposedly is recovering, and we're supposed to be reducing back and getting back into a normal flight path. And instead, if you graph this out, it looks like a hockey stick with the blade turned up.
Thank you, Senator. Did you want the answer to your question from LFO?
I'll staff and start, and I can finish.
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Whitsitt, just to the second question regarding the TANF increase, part of the information provided to the subcommittee in the context of the discussion with the agency is that the TANF caseload has not dropped off as quickly as had been anticipated a few months ago. So that cost is built into the budget. I believe we had a caseload impact of about $11.5 million general fund that was added as part of the subcommittee process to account for that. Again, coming down, but further out than had been expected. And your first question, I apologize, Senator, I did not track on that at all.
It is my understanding that there was a problem a couple of years ago about the work participation requirement for the TAMs not being met, the federal requirements not being met, and that we might be in a position to be severely penalized. I'm wondering if that has been resolved, or if we're still in that position where we may be severely penalized.
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Woods, I believe we're still in the process of getting a potential penalty. I don't believe that's been resolved yet.
How much is the penalty?
I do not know, Senator Woodson.
You have some rough idea?
Would you like to? I'd like to invite the director of DHS to come up, and maybe she can provide the
Yeah, I can
information.
touch on this also.
Sir, Senator Bates, go ahead.
Thank you. One of the key problems we're facing in Oregon is poverty. And the fact that TANF rolls are not coming down as quickly as we thought as the economy improved is very concerning to us. And we're trying to turn the page here. People who are primarily young women, some young men, who have children and can't find work that actually sustains his family. The goal of this program is to get to self-sufficiency. And we're trying to move in that direction. This budget is quite different from the last one from that point of view. As I said earlier, we're trying to move in that direction. The TANF program does not pay much money. It's really more for housing than anything else. It keeps people off the street for all intents and purposes. I'm not doing your math, so I'll double check that later. It is an expensive program. The alternative is people out in the streets in our communities, quite frankly. And these people need to be retrained. They need to be moved into jobs, and the jobs become available through ERDC and the other programs we have. It is a huge problem for the state. And we're not taking it seriously. We're taking it very seriously. It's disappointing. And that's a very soft word for what we're saying here. It's disappointing that the TANF rolls aren't dropping faster. They are going down, but not as fast as we want.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to ask the director.
Co-Chair Buckley, Co-Chair Devlin, for the record, Aaron Kelly Seal, Director of the Department of Human Services. Senator Whitsitt, to your question, you are correct that for the years between 2007, 8, and 9, the federal government did levy about a $27 million penalty against the state of Oregon for failing to meet the federal participation rates in the reauthorized TANF program. The department submitted a request for a waiver given Oregon's economic conditions and several other criteria. That request was denied. We also then submitted a corrective action plan, which is currently under review. We have not heard a decision on that plan. If we are found to be in compliance with the corrective action plan, the federal penalties will be waived. They have not yet been assessed.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the information. I have Representative Nathan and Representative Freeman. Representative Nathan, please.
Sure.
Sorry, Senator Whitsitt, if you could follow up on that. If you could quickly follow up.
I understand your answer regarding the from 2007 through 2009. Are we in compliance now, or are we still liable to more penalties if they find that the waiver, they don't grant you waiver?
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Whitsitt, we are at risk. It is a potential liability for the organization, and we do continue to struggle. We have concerted efforts, and as Senator Bates pointed out, this budget does make investments to really begin to turn the dial around the issue participation for the 2011-13 biennia. The amount of investment in the programming for TANF that goes toward helping people go to work and participate and engage in the program was reduced by 50%. The logic for that being that the jobs and the availability of opportunity for people to go to work was in such decline, and we were struggling just to meet people's basic needs. This budget makes investment in the jobs program, albeit a small and incremental one. I know there's more work to do. Should begin to pivot around our participation rate, and we do believe that we have already been making that pivot. I saw some numbers as recently as yesterday that show that our rate of employment and our rate of participation is increasing right now in TANF.
Thank you very much. Representative Nathan, please.
Thank you. I wanted to make just a couple of points about specifics in the budget that were included in the summary, but I want to emphasize them. First of all, with foster care, it was mentioned that there is an approach called differential response that we're investing in, or enhancement, meaning increasing funding. The point is that we know we need to not only improve the foster care system, but we need to do what we can to avoid the circumstances that lead to children being removed from their homes and placed into foster care. To the extent that we can provide services to families to keep children at home in a safe environment and see improvements in the family, that's really desirable, as opposed to quickly removing kids and seeing an increase in the number of kids proportionately moving into foster care. So one is to avoid children moving into foster care where possible, and there will be investments in what's called differential response. Get to them early. Also, to move them through foster care faster. We know that children who languish in foster care for month after month and sometimes year after year, that's not good for them. And we want to make sure that foster care isn't a parking stop and then moving from one home to another to another. This is not a good solution. So we're not trying to invest in maintaining the system as it currently exists because we're satisfied with it. We are indeed trying to make some fundamental changes so that the whole system from beginning to end, and including not moving into foster care, are improved. I also wanted to mention that repurposing bed capacity was mentioned. That's something that I think is very important as we see some need shrinking. We're trying to move people from long-term residential type treatment for various things, whether it's mental health or addictions or some other type of program that we have, to the extent that we can move people from more expensive residential beds to less expensive types of situations in communities. We're trying to do that to the extent that we can repurpose beds from one type of program to another. It's actually been demonstrated in many cases that people are better off with a different kind of program instead of just being left in a more expensive long-term residential facility. So that's another thing that I think we should take special note of watching over the next 2 years.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Freeman, Representative Hanna, and Senator Gerard, I believe, McHugh, and Senator Devon. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. And I have a question of professional staff. If we could
Would you like the director or the...
No, both staff, please.
Okay.
And while she's coming up, I would also like to remind folks, it's my understanding TANF is a cash award with no restrictions on how it's spent. So we would hope it's going to ramp, but it's not required to go to ramp. My specific question of the professional staff is last biennium we were talking about a lot of the early childhood programs that were in the DHS budget moving over to the education early childhood budgets. Has that happened, or are all those same budgets still part of this, all those programs still part of the DHS budget?
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Freeman, I believe one of the plans for early learning included moving employment-related daycare over to the Early Learning Council. That move did not happen as part of the current plan for early learning. So employment-related daycare stayed within the department. The programs that have formerly been with the Commission on Children and Families, however, did get folded into the Early Learning Council.
Thanks, Dan. So can you give us a rough idea of the dollars of those programs? When we're trying to compare last biennium to this biennium, it appears there's just a small increase in DHS, but it also may be that some programs and some funding budgets went over to a different portion of the state's budget somewhere.
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Freeman, none of the programs from within the Department of Human Services itself was moved. The Commission on Children and Families used to be part of the overarching Human Services budget, so those dollars are no longer there. I don't have the total in my head for what that chunk was that moved over to in the Education Department. It included Commission on Children and Families as well as the Child Care Division from the Employment Department, but I can get that for you. I just don't have it with me.
Great. Thank you. And the point I was making is a lot of us look at increases biennium to biennium, and when programs are moved from one budget area to another budget area, sometimes it doesn't track very well. So I'll be interested to see what those numbers are. I know some of the money that came into the early childhood education budgets came from these programs and accounted for some of that increase. I'm just curious how much it is. And the last thing, and I know we're on time deadline, but I want to say this, and this is sort of to Senator Wizard's point. You're starting to talk about $24 billion of biennium worth of programs here. But the one sort of general thing amongst these programs that the people that receive these services have in common, and this is a general statement, is that they're in poverty. There's qualifications. We say, if you make a certain amount of money, you don't qualify. So you're taking $24 billion out of the economy and saying we as a state know how to spend this money better and help you. My question would be to this group and the future groups, what would happen if that money stayed in the economy to that level of poverty, and it may bring people up out of poverty much better than the government programs can. So just a thought.
Thank you, Representative. I have Senator Gerard, I have Senator Devlin, and I have Senator Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Actually, as long as I've been on Ways and Means to try to understand this budget, this is a very complex budget, and I have a very simple question. Project Independence, I believe, is funded in this budget, and I was wondering what the amount was.
So, Lori, can you come back and maybe just kind of hang out there?
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Durant. Yes, Oregon Project Independence funding is maintained in the budget. It includes a little over, almost 10 the general fund, as well as that program is also now a designated state health plan program, so it draws some federal funds to go over to the Oregon Health Authority to fund health care costs.
Okay, colleagues, for me, I mean, we're spending billions of dollars here. This agency, I've been told, needs around $15 million to stay whole. And this is money that is extremely well spent because it saves you money up above. So for every dollar you spend there, you save a lot of money. So the $10 million, I think, is grossly inadequate. It's supposed to be around 15, and that really kind of bothers me.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Devlin.
Oh, boy, that's a good lead-in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't know it's going anywhere. There's a revenue package in the Senate that a goodly portion of it would be destined to go to seniors and a fair portion of it would be destined to go to OPI. But I just did want to correct some items on the table, not because I think that people aren't clear in what they're saying. I'm just trying to put some items on the table here. We do have about $25 billion total in expenditures. That is, if you divided it by the population, over $6,000 per every man, woman, and child. However, that $25 billion is over a biennium. The figure is still relatively staggering. It's actually a little bit over $3,000 per year. If you look at it in terms of the general fund dollars, it's about roughly, by the time the budget's over, it'll be between probably 4.2 and 4.4 billion. So it's about $1,100 a biennium, about $550 a year. If you take out, because it's in the OHA budget and tends to inflate it, PEB and OWEB, that number probably drops to under $400 per every man, woman, and child. I'm not trying to make that the numbers are small. They're staggering numbers. They're incredibly high numbers. Could the dollars be spent better? I actually think so. Could the dollars be converted back and just brought into this economy? I wish they could. Is the federal spending probably not sustainable? I actually agree with Representative Richardson. It's not. But I just want to put on the table that sometimes the numbers look bigger than they are. And the reality is that this is one of the fastest growing areas in the budget that we have in terms of human services, DHS and OHA. But the real pusher in terms of increasing costs is health care. And unless we get some control of the cost of health care, doesn't matter if it's the Affordable Care Act, doesn't matter if it's our additions to the Affordable Care Act, it'll be game over in about 10 years if we don't get some control over the cost of health care.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Winters and Representative Hanna. Senator Winters, please.
Just quickly, because what the good co-chair did not say, and I will ask staff, what percentage of the budget is federal and what percentage is state? And if we did not have the federal dollars, could we spend them?
Well, I'm going to let staff take a moment there. We'll let Representative Hanna talk. Or do you have those figures?
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Winters, I do not have that percentage split in my head, nor do I have it on a piece of paper. Perhaps my esteemed fiscal officer can calculate that quickly. The dirty look I got indicates the answer will be no. A lot of federal money is in the budget.
Generally we're somewhere around 60-40, 60% federal and 40% state. Because people are listening, and if we were not in compliance or in sync with the feds, we could not spend that 60%. And I just, because the feds say yes or no, whether or not, whatever the category, and we're not automatically in entitlements. I just need to say that. I need to say something else, because the impact on the budget and the decline will occur when we have a robust economy again and people are able to work and we don't have those needs anymore. Oregon, unfortunately, we've been in a bad recession. And the impact, it has been greater on, I have to say this because we've got a very few ladies that are here on this budgetary committee, but mostly when we talk about TANF and when we talk about those programs, we're talking about women with children. We're talking about women with children who are trying to keep limbs and bodies and keeping families together. So I need to put that out there. I've worked in this area since 1971 when I helped with the Department of Human Services and was in Children's Services Division. Would it be nice if we didn't have to do this? Absolutely. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had jobs to where individuals could have their self-worth and their dignity to take care of their own families? But in absence of that, we still need to make certain that children and families are being taken care of and that our seniors have the ability to lead the rest of their life in dignity. So is this budget, do we think that somehow this budget is too big? Do we think, I hope that one day we can sit here and say that the trend lines are going down because we do have a robust economy again and people are employed and paying into the tax system. And I will rest my case.
Thank you, Senator. To save time, we'll all associate ourselves with Representative Smith's comments on responsibility of fatherhood. Representative.
But he's right.
He's right.
He's spot on.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. No one likes math games more than I, and I appreciate those the senators have made. Senator, I would take your math and say, pretty good. Now go backwards and say that roughly 40% of Oregon's population is even a participant in these programs. That's right. So you could more than double the number you just created and say not just that, but twice as much goes to those who are affected. And if you use Senator Winter's math and say that a high proportion of that is directed towards women, you could quadruple the number. And I would also point out that the last time I looked, most Oregonians who pay Oregon tax also pay a federal tax. So Senator Winters, this budget's large. That may not be the defining thing here, but this budget is unsustainable, might be. And when you want to talk about federal or state participation in this, and you look at the growth, and we heard things about health care, controlling health care costs, this isn't doing it. And so we can, if we want to play with numbers, we can play with numbers all day long, but start to multiply against the people who actually receive the benefit, not against all Oregonians. So the customer is the person paying the bill, not the one receiving the benefit. So if you want to talk about who's paying the bill, we can do the math that way. If you want to see who's receiving the benefit, divide it down to the number of people who are getting it. And what you will find, if you dig deep enough, is that the people getting the benefit aren't getting the preponderance of this budget. The preponderance of the budget is spent on the people giving it out.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no further discussion, are there objections to the motion passage of this bill? I have Representative Freeman and Representative Hanna. I have Senator Whitsitt and Senator Girard. Motion carries. This work session. I open a work session on Senate Bill 246. Representative Reed, please.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. Senate Bill 246 establishes the Oregon Industrial Site Readiness Program, which provides two types of support to public entities that prepare sites for industrial development. Under this program, the Oregon Business Development Department may enter into tax reimbursement arrangements or into loan agreements with project sponsors for development of certified regionally significant industrial sites. Under the tax reimbursement arrangements, project sponsors can receive up to the full amount of their eligible site preparation costs plus interest. Under the loan agreements, the OBDD may forgive up to 50% of eligible site preparation costs. Payment to the project sponsor or the amount of the loan forgiven is equal in a particular year to 50% of the estimated incremental income tax revenues associated in that year with the eligible on on-site employees. The bill will reduce general fund revenue by directing certain personal income tax collections into the Oregon Industrial Site Readiness Program Fund instead of into the general fund. The amounts so deposited equal 50% of the estimated incremental income tax revenues associated with all eligible employers' on-site employees that year. Monies in the fund are then used to finance tax reimbursement arrangement payments to project sponsors and to reimburse OBDD for loan amounts that have been forgiven under the program's loan forgiveness provisions. Transportation and Economic Development Subcommittee recommends Senate Bill 246 be amended and reported out to pass as amended. And I have to add my thanks to a variety of stakeholders who have helped us put a lot of sideboards on this program. It's important to local entities around the state, local jurisdictions, local economic development entities in their efforts to ready specific sites for industrial development. I think this is a new and potentially very effective program that will help us get those sites ready for employment. I hope we can back it up.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Smith, please.
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Reed, project sponsors, does that include county, cities, and ports, or is it private sector? Can we understand that?
Mr. Chair, Representative Smith, thank you for the question. It is an important point that public entities are project sponsors. We expect that those that list you gave are good examples. We expect they would be working with private sector entities, but it's public sector entities that have to be project sponsored.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Co-Chair, just add an addendum for cautionary you should declare potential conflict of interest in a number of a limited liability company does economic development in Eastern Oregon. I work with county, cities, and ports.
So noted. Is there objection? Senator Whitsitt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A forgivable loan is pretty much a grant. So I guess my question is, what kind of loans are eligible to be forgiven, and who decides which loans are forgiven?
Mr. Chair, Senator, the forgivable loan is forgiven if conditions that are associated with the project are met in terms of hiring targets, in terms of wages, that sort of thing. If they're not met, the loan is not forgiven and must be repaid.
Thank you. Representative Hanna, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Representative Reed, is this the program that had a total of 3 projects?
Is this a new program?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hanna, no, it doesn't exist yet.
Does not exist yet. Further follow-up.
Please.
Is there a notification between OBDD and Oregon Department of Revenue when a loan is forgiven?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hanna, I'm not sure how to answer that question with a lot of confidence. I expect that there would be communications between those agencies in terms of the obligation, in terms of tax implications, but I think I'd be more specific to answer your question well.
Mr. Bender, do you have the answer to that question by chance? He's nodding his head.
Are they only to public entities? Are the loans only to public entities? So then there would not be a tax implication.
I'm Steve Bender with the Legislative Fiscal Office. I think I've heard a couple of questions. One of the questions, the first question I heard was about the notification. The way the program works is if it does have to be a public entity that enters into an agreement with Business Oregon to develop a particular site. Once the particular site is developed, then the payments that the state makes relating to the program depend upon an estimate of the income that employees on the site are earning and paying in taxes. The estimate is similar to the Shared Services Fund, or also called the Gain Share Program, in that the calculation is equal to 50% of the estimated taxes of the employees on the site. So the way that it would work is a public entity would enter into the agreement. If they are successful in that a business sites on the site that's been developed and does hire employees, the process will be that the department, Business Oregon Development Department, will report the information on the employment of the employees at that site to the Office of Economic Analysis that prepares the economic forecast. They will calculate the estimated income taxes of those employees. They will inform the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue will then take certain monies, certain personal income tax collections, not put them in the general fund, put them into a separately established fund, and then Business Oregon would use that money either to directly pay the local sponsors, the local governments, in the case where there was a tax reimbursement arrangement. In the case where it's a loan forgiveness, Business Oregon would just inform the locality that part of their loan is forgiven, and they would have the money for it.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. Did we have further discussion? No, don't believe we did.
I would just like to respond
very quickly.
If I understood the answer to that question properly, so if the company does well and meets the conditions of the loan, they may not have to repay the loan. But if the company does not do well and fails, then they will have to repay the loan, even though they have no means to repay the loan. So this structure seems to favor the default of loans and the loss of public money.
Mr. Chair, Senator Whitsitt, it depends very much on the arrangements of the loan. I think the Business Development Department will have the ability to structure those loans depending on the circumstances of the business that may secure the loan. I think that's a risk, but that's not either.
Thank you. Is there an objection to the motion before the committee? Seeing no objection, the motion carries. We're going to try to crank one more bill through before floor. Open work session, Senate Bill 253. Representative Reed, take another shot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Senate Bill 253 is a related bill. It establishes the Oregon Industrial Site Readiness Assessment Program in the Business Development Department. This new program authorizes OBDD to establish two competitive grant programs. The first grant program, which receives 80% of the available funds, provides grants to public entities to perform due diligence assessments and to create detailed development plans for regionally significant industrial sites that are publicly or privately owned. The second grant program, which receives 20% of available funds, provides funds to public entities to develop industrial land inventories and to prioritize sites for due diligence assessment and site preparation assistance. The bill restricts the Business Development Department to operating the Oregon Industrial Site Readiness Assessment Program solely with monies available specifically designated for that purpose in the Legislative Assembly. Because the bill does not provide money for the new program, it will not become operational unless funding for it is authorized in another bill. The Transportation and Economic Development Subcommittee recommends Senate Bill 253 be amended and reported out to pass as amended. This connects with the previous bill because the previous one has to do with specific sites, but unless there is a specific site known, it doesn't work very well. So Senate Bill 253, if we are able to fund it at a later date, allows for the development of inventories in areas around the state for what lands and sites might be available, and in the case of specific sites, to understand what might need to be done in order to get it ready. Appreciate your support.
Thank you, Mr. Representative Smith, please.
Sorry, Mr. Co-Chair. Sorry. Callers, I need to declare potential conflict of interest. I'm a member of the Limited Liability Company of Eastern Oregon. It says economic development in Eastern Oregon and working with cities and
Senator Johnson, please.
A major publication editorialized about the value of these two bills, and I just want to say on the record that there was no bigger champion than Representative Reed. These bills had technical difficulties, and he soldiered through and found solutions that I think make them live up to the promise that they may have of filling sites with jobs. And if that promise comes true, it will be as a result of Representative Reed's work on that.
And if it does not, it will be the responsibility. Are there objections to the motion before the committee? Seeing no objections, the motion carries. Members, we're going to recess. Senator Devin and I will talk with the presiding officers. We have a very long agenda left to go. It's very important that we actually move these. If we are going to head towards signing the it's important that we move these bills today. I don't know when we'll be reconvening, but please keep your schedule open. Senator, I know that you have a possible conflict. We will work around that to the best of our ability. But when we reconvene, we will have to move through. So we are. You want to make a motion? We'll make an announcement from the floor when we'll reconvene. So we are in recess.